Yeah, Fat Cats Podcast, different location, details to be shared, clandestine location, but with a guest who is known for another place that we usually do our podcasts, a regular at Guardians Nigeria, but that's for his co-curricular activities. Usually he's a sports lawyer, a rather prolific one at that. A friend of mine, Ivan Ojakol. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you very much for hosting me, and I'm honored to be on the Cats Podcast.
Yeah, you've been on the space before, and where we discussed the training issue
Oh yes.
of image rights and how players can best position themselves to be in a better case for when to negotiate deals or transactions regarding their images.
True.
Have there been any developments now, or we still rely on FUFA? FUFA is our Bible when it comes to image rights.
I haven't seen any really in Uganda, at least. So, but I believe since that dispute, there could have been some housekeeping here and there from the different federations, or them trying to ensure that they are in line with the law, or that they don't fall afoul of the law as far as image rights is concerned. But I could be overestimating or being too overly ambitious of some of the people that run these federations, and I'm sure inevitably there could be more people for running afoul of the law on image rights since that FUFA dispute than those that are complying with it. Yeah.
Yeah, so with that context of background of when we had that space, maybe just to let people know, why sports? Why did you pick sports law as an area to specialize in? There are guys who do different areas and whatever. So why sports law?
To be honest, it was sort of inadvertent, and I've always been a sports junkie of sorts. Sports aficionado who watches on a good weekend when there's a good DSTV subscription.
Yes.
I watch about 4 to 5 sports over the weekend. So inevitably there are a couple of other areas which I still specialize in and have interest in, from IP to meet the general commercial areas of contract agency, tech. So because there's a strong interlinkage, for example, between intellectual property and sports. So for example, you mentioned image rights. If you're a lawyer who's interested in intellectual property, and you know about, for example, the Winnie Asege case, and if you know about the Winnie Asege case, then you read about Mo Salah and his dispute with the Egyptian Federation.
Yes.
Then you start to realize, okay, there's an interlinkage here. And then you also realize that there is a hobby that you love. On the weekend, you go to Chadondo Rugby Club, or you be on TV watching the Premiership, and you're like, you know what? There is a hobby here, and there is a way I can bring it into my practice or my profession.
Yeah.
Or there's a way I can make money out of it. Or there's even a way beyond making money that I can give back to the community of sports people who bring a lot of joy and glory to us as a country. So you're like, you know what, let me check it out, let me try it out, let me see how it goes. Before you know it, one thing leads to the other. And one day you get a call from a sports editor, sports editor, tells me, so Ivan, I think you have good knowledge about sports and the law. Aren't you tried something? So you write an article, it tells you write more and more and more. Before you know it, you've fallen deep into it. And almost every week you're reading up on the latest case from somewhere.
Yes.
You say buying books. You say looking for master's programs.
Yes.
So you, without necessarily intending, have become a sports lawyer. Then you realize, okay, this thing is actually big out there.
Yes.
The guys are proper making a kiwi. But also importantly, again, like many other areas of law, African lawyers, or Africans generally, have been left out of it. If you go to a sports program run under FIFA, they usually have diplomas they run. You always find about 2 Africans. Or even if Simba or Yanga in Tanzania or whichever big club has a sports dispute, there will always be some Argentine lawyer chosen, some British lawyer, some Italian lawyer. You're like, okay, but it's an area we can get into. So like that, I found myself into the area and building expertise slowly and incrementally. And thankfully, I seem to have gotten acclaim, or at least recognition, as far as it's concerned. Yeah.
Well, for those of you who want to look for someone to talk to about sports law, here's the man, Ivan Ojakol. For those of you watching, this is the Fat Cats podcast. I think this is the Suits edition, where we're going to discuss totally law. I think that's why Ruben has handed over it to me to discuss legal issues that will be arising out of many things that have happened the last 1 or 2 weeks in respect to Ugandan rugby.
Yes.
Particularly, there are some articles you have written out, very much want us to get into them. What does it mean to bring a game or a sport into disrepute? So that's the discussion we really want to have today. And just inform the viewers who are watching and those who will be listening on our audio platforms. We have had what you would call the Uncovering Facts series of the Fat Cats podcast, where we are dissecting the matters and affairs affecting the disciplinary proceedings going against Ivan Magomu, particularly in respect to the charge of referees assault, which has been since decided in his favor, that has been dismissed. But then there is the glaring issue of what it means to bring the sport into disrepute. This is a charge that has been put out against very, very many players in different fields. But if you focus on rugby, it's one of those that has stuck, that your particular action or misconduct in a particular way has put the game of rugby into disrepute. So I think Ivan and I are going to have this discussion, what it means to bring a game or a sport, in this case rugby, into disrepute. So Ivan, you dissected something in your article. You had an article over the weekend where you dissected the matter of what it means to bring the game into disrepute. What key criteria or what key things should one look out for as a player, particularly when it comes to bringing a game into disrepute, particularly from a conduct perspective?
Okay, just to give where this term perhaps arose from, a bit of context. Because of the nature of sport and its increased commercialization over the years, sportsmen are no longer just sportsmen. They are products that must be sold out there. They are role models that must keep good reputation and good behavior in public in order to inspire the next generation to take over from them. But importantly, as far as the product is concerned, and because they're a product, it also means that those overseeing them, clubs, federations, sports governing bodies, want to ensure their products are properly protected or even are still marketable out there.
Yes.
So increasingly and over the years, in just about any sports legislation that you find out there, from the Premier League to rugby to wherever, there will always be a clause, a disrepute clause. And they always have that term, bringing the sport into disrepute. Be it in a code of conduct of players, be it in a regulation or whatever, always be something about disrepute. And also because of this day and age of social media and the digital era, it is important that clubs or people overseeing or running the product that is sports ensure that their people are in line, especially with their commercial interests. For example, you don't want a sportsman or a player of a national team going and saying bad things about a sponsor or posting pornography on their X page or Facebook page, etc. So hence the development of that term. Now, because it seems to be something where a weapon that sports governing bodies, federations, etc. have used over time in order to discipline, in quotes, discipline. And I'm using that deliberately because it's also a tool to curb on dissent. Especially in our part of the world where things like accountability and transparency in the running of things generally is almost unheard of. So curbing dissent, so that tool has been used very many times as a stick, as a weapon to discipline these people. So hence bringing the sport into disrepute being incorporated in many say codes of conduct of players or even constitutions of sports governing bodies, etc. The only challenge though is in line with that concept of bringing it of using that term or that concept for selfish reasons other than from a proper policy perspective of ensuring that sports integrity is maintained, many times you find that in many of these legislations, sports legislations, it is put there for the sake of just being put there without any serious reason. In other words, the drafting will always be problematic, for example, without any proper clarity. For example, there will be no proper definition of what it means.
Yeah.
Or even examples of what would entail that. For example, are you going to, will it be racism? Will it be someone conducting themselves in a very uncouth way, or someone being involved in match fixing, or someone doing drugs, etc. So it becomes a problem like that. And because of that, as we have seen in, for example, the Ivan Magomu case, there is usually a problem of conflating the players, because the player first opened that social media page, maybe at say 15 years, when he just wanted to interact with friends and catch up. And because now the superstar and the captain of a national team, or the product that you want to sell to a sponsor, you now want to say that even what they post on their social media should be regulated. So if a player, for example, posts themselves, they are at a bar, and for example, get into a fight at a bar, you're going to take them on for that. Remember, usually, like I mentioned, because of the putting the disrepute clause in sports legislation, just for the sake of it, and also maybe copying and pasting it from wherever, you have not properly defined. So a guy is on his frolic of his own at night in the bar, gets into a fight, posts it on social media, and then you say they are bringing the sport into disrepute. But over time, what has happened in a couple of decisions, I think there's one called Zobko versus FINA. FINA, the sports federation that regulates swimming internationally. I think there was a guy who was at the 2004 Olympics. He was a coach of a swimming national team of, I think, Ukraine or something like that. And then one of his daughters was a swimmer. Now the daughter, I think the guy had not approved of the guys who were hitting on her or the boyfriends.
Yes.
Yeah, she had chosen.
As all fathers should.
He got into a proper scuffle with her, and I think he even slapped her, pushed her out. Before you know it, FINA is coming for the guy and saying, you know what, you're putting our sport into disrepute.
By beating your daughter. Disciplining your daughter.
Disciplining your daughter. You've embarrassed us, what have you, even they took him on and, of course, found him liable through their disciplinary proceedings. But the guy appealed to CAS. CAS is the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is more or less the apex dispute resolution body when it comes to sports matters. CAS say, no, this was a personal thing, really. And sports into disrepute should not be conflated with personal misdemeanors, personal actions. And that becomes a problem, because that many times, because of the failure to divorce a sportsman from who they are as a person, who they are as a human being, who they are as a lawyer, who they are as a father.
Yes.
And then you're saying that because they have disciplined their daughter, or therefore they are liable for bringing the sport into disrepute. But importantly, CAS set out a test. What amounts to bring your sport into disrepute is not just a case of you potentially thinking about it. It's not about your feelings, your ego being hurt. It's about actual proof. In other words, for example, you go on social media, or you go and get out sports articles from wherever, or newspaper articles, and you see people are now saying his actions show that he's bringing the sport of swimming into disrepute. Or you see whatever is going viral on social media. So it should be like
someone is cancelling sponsorship because of that.
Exactly. So proper evidential proof. So just a matter of you just potentially throwing it out there to bring the sport into disrepute. You must properly prove that indeed someone has brought the sport into disrepute.
No, but when you look at it from this perspective, now I think what you're basically saying is that for every matter which involves bringing the sport into disrepute, it depends on the area you're at.
Exactly.
For example, if in Uganda, there are very many things I could say or do.
Yes.
That in one way or the other, my personal account could bring the game into disrepute.
Yes.
Or for example, I could say something, maybe a racial slur or something like that.
Yeah.
And in doing so, I could be putting on my national team jersey.
Yeah.
Or I say I'm the captain of the national team and I say this. But now, how do players get around this? Because you see, You're saying it should be actual. It should not be
Yeah.
perceived and the like. But now I think we can't avoid it. We have to go into the matter of Ivan Magomu.
Absolutely.
Because now for me personally, if I look at it this way, I am the NCS boss.
Yeah.
You are throwing up innuendo. You are basically putting out the innuendo that I am a corrupt gentleman. That's something that is not taken very, very lightly when it comes to instances of maybe ethics or even public perception. I'm being perceived as someone who is actually corrupt, whereas notwithstanding other reports we have had of refunds and the like, I have not been adjudged anywhere to be corrupt. And not only that as a case scenario, but even very many instances, why should I as a sports union not exercise my right to whip my players into line? Why should someone go and think because they're a sportsman, they don't owe a duty or responsibility to manage their social media in order?
That becomes the trick, and inevitably, of course, unfortunately, and of course, all of this goes into the wider sports ecosystem in Uganda. Still being in an amateur sports setting, not even semi-pro. So the sportsman has perhaps not woken up to the reality that they are bigger than they think they are, or perhaps could impact on public opinion more than they think they are.
Yes.
Yet you've forgotten that perhaps there's that kid in school who has been inspired by your exploits on the pitch or whatever great things you've done over the years. So, and all of that again comes down to the wider sports ecosystem of, we have not properly created professional sports setting. For example, when you say, and I'm going to answer your other question later, when you say a code of conduct of players.
Yeah.
URU is a governing body of sports in Uganda. URU deals with clubs, right?
Yeah.
So whichever club subscribes to the constitution becomes a member, right? But in becoming a member, it also means inevitably the players playing under the club are also in one way or the other bound or governed
by URU, yes.
But how many of these clubs, for example, have, for example, if it's a law of contract, there's a constitution here, then there's a code of conduct. But if you find out how many players have contracts in rugby, for example, how many clubs do actually offer contracts to players? So that becomes a bit of a challenge, because the contracting of the player, if a club is bound and has signed up to all these documents that make it a member of URU,
yes,
how is the player going to be bound by URU? Is it by just participating in URU tournaments and signing documents? So I'm talking about the trickle down of the regulation.
Yes.
The player is in and of itself not proper yet. So, for example, if a player decides not to respect URU's regulations or laws or whatever,
or guidance, they give
because he didn't sign anything, there's nothing properly binding him to the member of URU. You get it, huh? So all of this comes out to the wider sports governance problems in the country, and inevitably that's why we have these challenges of players saying, okay, you don't really care about bringing a sport into disrepute or whatever. So, but inevitably, as the sport grows, and hopefully it will grow in the near future, inevitably sportsmen will have to have social media handlers or things like that.
Social media handlers, yes.
But also inevitably, clubs also need to regulate the handling of social media.
So clubs internally,
yes. I mean, there should be regulations. I mean, this happens a lot in the professional world. There should be do's and don'ts on social media. This you can post, this you cannot post. But now back to the Ogoel issue, and the problem here is that you and I are lawyers, and we look at it in line with the concept of innocent until proven guilty.
Yes, exactly. That's where I'm going.
Yeah, innocent until proven guilty. And it's a bit of a tricky area, of a murky area, because here's a person who's not yet pronounced guilty by anyone.
Exactly.
But they're all is
they're just insinuations and allegations. So
allegations from Parliament, from the IGG. So if a gentleman like Ivan Magomu jumps on what is already out there,
yes,
you call it overwhelming evidence,
overwhelming evidence in courts, yes.
but has not been pronounced upon by a court of law. Someone may argue it perhaps may not be bringing the sport into disrepute, because he's more or less making what we would call a fair comment. He's more or less talking about something that is already more or less judicially noticed out there.
Yes.
Even if a court has not pronounced itself, but there are all his reports about the gentleman. But that, of course, does not make Dr. Ogwell guilty of anything that is out there. So, but maybe inevitably going forward, that is perhaps a lesson for. Of course, there must be a balancing act between freedom of speech and all the other rights enshrined under our constitution, and the right of the player to exercise his personality with their obligations as a player. And that is where the balancing act comes in, because inevitably, as a player or as a sportsman or even as a lawyer, and this also brings into play the whole argument of amateur versus professional. Because the man is a lawyer. Even if he would actually be spending more time doing legal work and all the other professional work more than he plays rugby. And so it becomes a bit of a challenge bringing full force some of those concepts from the more developed world in this part of the world. Because in an amateur sports setting, how much control in a sports setting where there are no contracts for players, where some players don't even earn a shilling.
But
how much control is there?
Look at it this way. Look at it this way. The union, cognizant of those scenarios of how challenging it is to have every player have a contract, is saying, let's deal with the club. You understand? Let's deal with the club, sign the constitution, sign the tournament manual, and you as a club, you have undertaken to register your players. So in your undertaking to register these players are in essence bound by laws and governance structures and whatever that applies to the union. And I think that has been a very big issue where many players talk about that we did not sign a contract. And I think maybe just even for context is that particular clubs also have the what they would call the registration forms, where you sign and you agree to particular undertakings like code of conduct. And I think that's why the clubs need to come in and educate more. But now in a scenario of this nature, the union has dealt with the clubs, and the clubs have to do the trickle down. How feasible is it? I don't think it's very feasible to ask a club of whatever stature to now go and monitor what someone has said on social media or come up with a policy to kind of do that. Look at this case, and I think this is something very, very important that we need to discuss here, maybe before we break. Israel Folau, very, very importantly, I think very many people know that what happened to him. He came up on his social media, and I think it was Instagram, and he mentioned something about, he quoted the Bible verse, talking about people of the LGBT nation, alcoholics, adulterers, and some other, I think, fornicators. He quoted the Bible and said, repent now or you will go to hell. And that brought a lot of turmoil in the rugby sphere in Australia, because particularly this is a guy who many would argue fumbled a $4 million Australian contract, where he was basically being paid all that money over a period of time because of expressing his views. Now, even with the social media policy that you're advocating for, a club per se cannot control how many characters on X these days. 200 something. You cannot control my 200 something characters. So now the balance, and one of the things he raised in argument is saying that I have the right to practice my religion, and I did not actually directly attack, but I quoted the Bible verse.
True.
So same thing here. We have very many players dictate what they are able to post and what not to post. And I think even in if you draw similar parallels with Magomu and Israel Folau, one of the things that had been highlighted was that in Magomu's case, he had been charged before we bring the game into disrepute, of which he pleaded guilty and served his time, a 6-month match ban. And then Folau was pointed out by Rugby Australia, saying that these posts you make are kind of alienating our fans who feel like you're directly using the scriptures to attack them, and he undertook not to do so. And on that basis, he managed to sign a $4 million Australian dollar contract. So now, in the scenarios, now we find ourselves, people different years, but they find themselves in the same pit, which is particularly bring the game into disrepute. So now to you is that for a player watching this, what do they need to do in respect not to in respect to exercising their rights within what you'd say confines of a policy? How do the players express themselves? I think, do you need to say, for me, as we Ugandans usually say, or you say personally, my view is to avoid to say that you have taken out the general perception of you being a rugby player, but you're saying as my person, as myself.
Okay, of course, like I mentioned earlier, it seems to be a murky subject and an area that we perhaps need more time to properly study in this part of the world, especially because we live in an amateur sports setting. But social media handlers, and it's also an opportunity now for people skilled in that area to come and advise or even take opportunity and get clients playing sport. But disclaimers, yes, like you mentioned, can come in handy, I believe. But also, as far as I'm concerned, and this is a problem with sports regulation, it's usually a very unbalanced contract negotiation terrain.
Yes.
As opposed to our normal workplace. You go to a place, you demand, I want this amount of money, etc. You probably, but here you are. First of all, a club has already signed up to some constitution wherever, which perhaps you're not a party to, and for you just come into play. But remember, whatever contract, whatever document you're going to sign in this club flows from or emanates from that constitution, which has mandatory provisions, which is as if, and many times they take it or leave it. The union will say, come and sign our constitution. If you're not a part of it, you don't get to play a season. You get whatever document it will be. And that has been some of the criticism when it comes to sport regulation. It seems to be overly draconian, more than sports employment, sports, and seems to stretch beyond the normal boundaries of life. And that becomes a problem because and I understand because many a time extraordinarily beyond you and I who are employed wherever, these guys are looked at as products, commercial products. We want you to earn money, but even us, we're going to use you to earn money. And I mean, Fat Cats is earning money of sportsmen. We're talking about rugby. So it is something quite unique, and the draconian nature of sport regulation, sports employment, and whatever around sports is something that is already has been debated through academia and all over the international sports law world. So I think disclaimers could come in handy, but also importantly, individual negotiation if a club, and these are questions, or these are points you could raise when you're negotiating your contract, or even have special clauses of, for me, when I want to talk about this, I can talk about whatever I want. My employment shall not extend to my social media, or something like that.
Yes.
So individual contracting would perhaps come in handy. But of course, again, because of the nature of these things, many times someone is just literally just impose documents on you and things on you, and because you want to play and you look at it as fun, I just want to play, have win for my club, whatever, and go home and practice my profession as an engineer. But there are wider ramifications for some of those things, as you can see. So perhaps is an opportunity, and it is an area where social media handlers, social media professionals could come in handy in as far as helping our sports people deal with social media better, but also individual contract negotiations as far as I'm concerned. But also for me, how extremist or how draconian should the regulation or sports employment go? Well, there's a contest between a human right, like expression,
and
like freedom of religion, and a contract of employment. What should take the day?
But here the players are not necessarily employed. But let's say, let's assume they are employed. Let's assume they're employed. They get a salary at the end of the month. How to balance those interests?
Exactly. Whether or not the the debate around the money trickling down or whether
Yes.
they get the money they're supposed to get, but there's a document and I don't know for how long it runs. For example,
Yes.
if a national team player, you sign a code of conduct or whatever it is, you may not perhaps be chosen the next two circuits, but in the third circuit you could be chosen.
Yes.
How long does that document go now? You see, but and that becomes a very interesting area because it could be also a lacuna that perhaps our sports governing bodies should look into, of just how far should their regulation or how far does it go in terms of, I mean, if I last played for the national team 5 years ago, am I still a national team player? How far? And of course, we many times, unfortunately, don't have access to these documents that players sign. For example, the Magomu documents are only leaked because of this current spat.
Yes.
But otherwise, there's need also for these things to be out there so that players can be well advised or properly advised. But for me, a contest between a right, as long as the right, in line with our, what is it called, the limitation clause, as long as you're not infringing on other people's rights, or as long as you're properly exercising it,
you think there's no issue whatsoever?
You could take the day. And I think that's one of the arguments that, unfortunately, the matter never really saw the light. We never really got a judgment or whatever. Because I think Israel Folau and the Australian Rugby Union sorted the matter out of court.
Yeah,
and I think one of his arguments was that me exercising my right
to
practice religion.
Exactly.
And
I can't be deemed to have discriminated
exactly.
someone.
So there's a tricky balance, and all of this, people are interested in academia in these areas. Maybe
Yes.
we should get some more papers and so that we can know how to go about these things. But sports, inevitably, from just those examples, shows you just how extreme it can be.
Yeah.
For what is supposed to be fun and games area, that it goes and regulates even your bedroom.
Yes.
And how you should conduct your personal life, which is not the normal employment for you and I. You can go and drink beer from here, you can go and do crazy things, and our employers,
but as long as it doesn't affect.
Exactly.
But if it brings it to distribute, you have the right to enter. Yes, we're here at talking sports and distribute at the Kampala Business Lounge, a premium center of serenity, and at the same time, a place of peace where you can have your meetings, set up your conference, set up your talks from here, and at the same time also be able to indulge in the local and key restaurant. Plenty of discounts, happy hours on particular selected days, as well as also having the opportunity to engage in some fine dining from the restaurant and the chefs who provide this. A very serene environment, as you see, very spacious and comfortable for those who would want to take their time off. So do come to the Royal Complex that is near the old taxi park. Come to the 4th floor at the Kampala Business Lounge and just be ushered into the hospitality of the local and key restaurant, or at the same time enjoy the facilities and utilities that come with the Kampala Business Lounge when it comes to being your favorite meeting spot to conduct your business before you engage in acts of disrepute. Yeah, back here for Cats Podcast. Took a short break here to just appreciate the marvel of the Kampala Business Lounge. And shockingly, we have been, or rather happily, we have relocated and now we are in the boardroom where the business deals are signed. Ivan, would you very much want to sign a player contract here for some rugby players and say that, look, you have managed to sign your contract with your club and we are doing the unveiling here at the Kampala Business Lounge?
It's beautiful, splendid. It's a beautiful place, and without a doubt. And trust me, I think any player who decides to come here as a location will get a very good deal.
You'll get a very good deal. Yeah, so back from the break, we've, I think, managed to do justice on what it means to bring the sport into disrepute. From the different discussions that have been on social media, as well as those that we have had amongst ourselves. Now, I think, talking about contracting and signing a contract here, many calls have been made on social media for players to use this opportunity to make a step in the right direction, which is either to unionize or unify their voices. in respect to aspects of welfare. And I think one of the key things about welfare they have highlighted is things of like medical insurance, better pay or allowances, contracting, as well as maybe terms of good medical checkups and the like. So when it comes to sports and unionization, you and I watch the NBA. We're very much aware that they have a collective bargaining agreement where they have a players union. I think the current president is CJ McCollum of New Orleans Pelicans, and I think even other sports, even the NFL.
Isn't it the Boston Celtics guy? What's his name?
Jalen Brown?
Jalen Brown.
Unless the regime changed. I remember there was Chris Paul, then there was this other guy. So now, in respect to that, in abstract, it looks something very easy and straightforward. But what recommendations? Because you see, for me personally, I think that to unionize, you need to get as many players as possible in a room. To pick one representatives, pick players who can be able to advocate, depending on the criteria. We have different rugby playing regions. We have the central, we have the eastern, we have the western, we have the northern as well. So to get players from different regions to be able to advocate, to act as regional anchors, to advocate for the different regions of rugby, and how to sign up these particular players. Will they need to be a subscription fee? I don't think the union can sustain its activities without any sort of injection of funds, and maybe have manners of collecting these funds and the like. But it begs the question, how can we do this? How can the players do this?
Well, again, it's a bit of a tricky question and a tricky scenario, especially because I think the union, many a time, through threatening or through what's the word? It's called a hangman's what? There's always this whole, for example, I've gone through bringing the sport to disrepute.
Yeah.
They always have these tools, all this arsenal, all these things at their disposal that they use to come dissect or even to properly whip people into line, whatever they want. So it becomes a bit of a trick. And I think I've read a couple of articles in the past, I think from Robert Mandoy and a couple of guys, where he was detailing a couple of stories of how previously players have tried some of these things and they've come unstuck because of even divide and rule from the union or through many of those tools at their disposal that they use to, what's the word, to dissipate whatever efforts are aimed at unionizing. But inevitably, the players' union is important. Like you mentioned, the example of the NBA and the collective bargaining agreements and GC, where, for example, they made stipulations on minimum wages, minimum pay, etc., or even stipulations on I think it's generally about pay and player conditions and welfare, etc. And it's a bit of a trick because, extrapolating some of these examples from the more developed world to Uganda is always tricky. Again, because of the amateur sports setting. But a union, I think, will be the first step for me in as far as whatever efforts are concerned towards player welfare, towards professionalization is concerned. And again, it becomes very interesting because and this is where the trick, you know how sports for a very long time has always claimed to be independent.
Yeah.
Or even autonomous from national laws. Because there's a regime as far as unionization is concerned of workers, etc. So would players, for example, go under that regime? Or are there provisions, say from Rugby Africa or even World Rugby, that allow the unionization of players? And that would be very interesting because inevitably, as far as legal regime is concerned in Uganda, I know for a fact that even one person can constitute a union. So perhaps, but again, someone else will argue that because, especially ever since the 2013 National Council of Sports Regulations, many of these federations and associations were registered as trusts.
Yes.
So if you're registered under a legal regime in Uganda, can you still claim to be entirely independent? Even if you say you derive your existence from one rugby, etc. So it becomes very interesting. But yes, I think for me, inevitably, whatever mechanism is there, be it going under national laws or whatever mechanisms are provided for under World Rugby, go follow through with that. And I think that will come in handy. Because as far as I'm concerned, for example, with the Ivan Magomu issue, if he appeared before the disciplinary committee with his lawyer, a union representative would also have been there.
A union representative,
for
yes.
back him up. Or even as far as the council is concerned, the council of URU,
yes,
there should be a union representative there.
Union representative there,
so
yes.
it inevitably, for me, could be the magic wand, perhaps. And it's something, if our rugby player or if our sportsman, that should be pursued aggressively. A lot of stories or rumors, some people are trying to pursue it, but I think inevitably it is something that will come in handy. And not just in rugby, but generally Ugandan sport. I've not really heard of any in football, which perhaps is the most developed sport, or the one that has a semblance of semi-professionalism. I've not heard of a players' union, because I know inevitably any sports administrator with the way sports is run in this country wouldn't want a sports union and apply all kinds of mechanisms to have it fail.
Dead on arrival.
Dead on arrival at this nascent level, nascent stage. So yeah, I think for me, if you want to set up a union, even one person, as far as the law in Uganda is concerned, can set up a union.
Yeah.
You can start from there, knowing how some of these rugby players are, many of them hiding under players' code of conduct. They don't want to be seen out there, but inevitably, say if Ivan Magomu set up a players' union and started making noise from there, or even advocating for players' rights, etc., inevitably some guys will jump on it without a doubt. So I think it is something that players should get more interested in, and perhaps educated on. And I don't know why, even things like bringing rugby players, maybe through Fat Cats, we can explore this.
Yes.
Bringing rugby players under one roof on things concerning their welfare, minus a union representative or the union involved. I usually frowned at or looked at as if dissent.
Yes.
As if you're
I see what you mean. Yes.
I don't know why things like that I look at very negatively, but
like
we can start with that.
Yes.
I mean, there are legal minds that could help with educating them, or even helping them structure these things. I think really that for me, from even a lawyer's perspective, yes, there could be money involved, but it is something any lawyer really would want to be involved in from a nascent stage, even from a pro bono perspective.
Yeah.
Because I think it will go a long way in developing sport, or even if you're a lawyer, leaving your mark on sport. So I think that is something that should be pursued. And like I mentioned earlier, even one person can have a union.
Yes.
So there should not be any worries about numbers. The numbers will come along the way. For example, I think as far as I'm concerned, these baby steps by Ivan Magomu started the image rights matter. Now this one are small steps that will eventually have a ripple effect on the running of not only rugby but Ugandan sport. So we just need one person like this to start a union, and then eventually people will join him along the way.
Yeah, I think when you mentioned the union, and I think one of the things that it brings out very, very clearly is bargaining power. I think bargaining power is boosted to a higher platform. Particularly take into account the national team engagements. I think those ones where everyone has the opportunity and the pride to represent their country. I think you have seen from the Olympics how important that is, and the like, and how players particularly can be able to put themselves in a platform to advocate for better conditions and the like. And I think I read an article, I think the other week, majorly talking about how player welfare has been an issue even way back in 2016 and even years before. So presidents of past have suffered with this issue, and I think it coming to the forefront. Even back in the day, I think one of the key things was that a player like Cyrus Wathum appeared on NBS, I think a sports show, and was basically explaining these things and saying that this has been an issue. I think there have been receipts being dropped here and there, screenshots of back in the day of the union having organizations for player welfare and the like. And I think
all of this, what I'm seeing
is
the need for a mindset change or a paradigm shift. I think there's still a class of either former rugby players or even current who still look at rugby as fun.
Yes.
Fun and games or leisure. Or because I played it in Namiriango.
Yes.
And I'm an engineer or doctor.
As long as the game is okay. But look at it this way.
People, many of the boys.
But look at it this way. These former players you talk about have at least thrown their hearts in the game, and you could say considerably under their stewardship. Yeah. Some of these key sponsorships have come in bigger. Maybe you could make an argument sake that the leadership has in one way or the other through galvanizing players together and improving their coaching and skills has made the players achieve great. And I mean, for players to achieve, there has to be leadership.
Absolutely.
So leadership has helped grow the game to a point where the players are also enjoying the benefits. I think where the problem now is the trickle down. The drops are not reaching the ground. They are stopping somewhere. I think that's what the major concern of players is.
How do you address that?
Now, to address that, I think these things come down to communication and accountability. I think those are things that need to be emphasized. Transparency as well. Transparency in the sense of to allay all these fears.
Do they come down to people?
Yeah. It could be particular people's or mindsets. I think the mindset now is that we are in a world where communication dictates how people perceive what you share. Taking, for example, the Ivan Kabagambe issue, where he posted and said something about, he put out a tweet about the welfare of the team in South Africa. And he kind of alluded to the fact that it's because of his speaking out that he got withdrawn from the program. That may not have been the case, but in this scenario where there is a buzz about welfare, the case could be made that he actually was bounced because of that. And this is the scenario where Ivan was taken out of the program way at the beginning, before even the national team players went to South Africa. Other national team players joined him in South Africa. So if that was addressed at that point, transparency or reason given why he has been withdrawn from the program, that couldn't have been used to fan the flames of the player welfare struggle that is ongoing right now. So communication. Now you see, if that was communicated earlier, and I think they will pick it up with time, but if that was communicated earlier, such issues would not have blown up into a whole-blown crisis, where even recently, I think on Friday, there was a communication. I don't think even the union has officially put it out there, but in different WhatsApp groups where they were mentioning that they were not applying the principle of quantum merit. They were basically saying that you're jumping out of the program or breaching the terms of the program, in essence means that you avoided everything, so you're not entitled to any money. And yet, I think that principle ideally would say, okay, the contract has been voided, but you have done something. So let's give you for the days you have done the work. The other days, you have forfeited them because of your initiation of the breach. Now, if something like that had been addressed earlier or communicated, I think that would have not blown up into an issue. And
so inevitably, you admit it's a leadership gap.
Not a leadership gap. Not a leadership gap. There are very many things you can talk about this regime of leadership at URAU that they could have not done right, but there are also other things they have done well.
True.
So I think that's one of the areas I would very much want to see how they can harness some sort of opportunity to grow, particularly communication. If that communication comes out, because when you own the narrative, it becomes easy. I know they said regarding the disciplinary, you can't hold it against them because they have said they are not going to comment on the disciplinary until the appeal is completed. Maybe that's when they'll get in front of the cameras and be able to explain the narration. And we very much hope to host the union officials on the podcast as well as we uncover the numerous facts. But Ivan, those are things that for me personally, I would think would go a very, very long way in ensuring that these guys get to a point of where these, what you would call social media outbursts, no longer happen.
And some of that also comes from, and some of these things have been even recommended, especially in the advent of the National Sports Act, that we need more professional secretariats. Meaning, these things where people volunteering,
yes,
and just being there because he's a legend and just give him an office.
Yes.
We need professional people to run the secretariats. It should be run from a commercial business perspective. And anyone who's involved in commercial business knows that there are things you can't take lightly, communication, for example, like structures, like things like those. So, for example, every club, I know Yuri has a CEO, but I'm not trying to.
Yes.
What's the word? I don't want to sound harsh. I'm not trying to say he's incompetent or anything like that.
Yes.
But we just need the right people in the right places.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily have to be rugby people, by the way. He doesn't have to have played rugby in the past, but as a guy, say he's from the commercial world and has certain great ideas, and and has certain level of excellence, can come in handy and help us put our house in order.
Yeah.
So things like those. So for me, professionalizing of secretariats comes in very, very handy. For example, look at small things. Just if you start with small things like the offices of the union.
Yes.
I mean, things like those.
You want the offices changed.
We need proper professional settings.
I think the word going around is that when all is done and dusted at Nambole, there may be a few federations or unions take up a few office setups there. So it's something looking forward to. But I think when you come to the aspect of the leadership there, I think it was an advertised job, so the best candidate was able to succeed in that.
I guess so.
Yeah. So now, as we wrap up, now contracts, player contracts. What do you think? Just a word to the players. What are those pertinent clauses in any player contract that any player may want to come and sign at lock and key and unveil themselves as a player for this team, the club, or even national team call-up? What particular clauses should those players look out for as they engage with the clubs, with the unions? What particular aspects? I know many of us will rush to the money area and we say that, I'm getting this. Is it advisable to break it down in 2 months and days? Is it something that you should look at in terms of image rights, which property rights you're giving away of yourself? What key clauses do you think players should be able to look out for when it comes to contracting? I have some on my mind that I think players should look out for, but just to hear from you.
Okay. Again, the danger of some of these things sometimes is comparing oranges and apples.
Yes.
Or extrapolating examples from the Western world where things are highly professional and are working, etc. But you mentioned, for example, image rights. If a union is getting 300 million, 500 million,
yes,
what is there for me? There must be a bit of selfishness in negotiating and signing some of these contracts, because just from what we mentioned earlier, image rights are personal, and because beyond the fact that I'm going to play for you and do a good job for you and ensure that I'm there for training days and ensure I'm there for match days, when I see as a player from Hippo Zupo said the other day that he had not gotten any consent for his picture to appear somewhere.
Yes, for his picture to appear somewhere.
So I think things like those, really, you must understand that, again, that you're beyond fun and games, you're beyond playing sports for physical fitness. That here is a commercial product. I am a product that guys are going to earn money from. And I am the real stakeholder in sport, because It is because of you that, for example, Fat Cats
Yeah.
has this show going on.
Yes.
It's because of you that a certain sponsor, they call it sports marketing.
Yes.
Some guy is going to reach out to some sports and tell them, but you know what, there are people playing this sport. Why don't you come and invest so they can increase your mileage? And
Yes.
You know, so you're the real product beyond sports administrators, etc. And selfishly negotiate. Of course, again, it comes of a bit of a tricky balancing act because you're in an amateur sports setting and you don't want to come off as if overly
Frustrating.
frustrating. Yes. But if I'm a star player, for example, and I know I was the league's top scorer last season, or have certain unique attributes about me,
Yes.
then why don't I find out
Leverage my position to get more money.
beyond the say 500k, 1 million, 2 million I'm going to get? Should have an extra, you know, for my image rights for you to exploit them or something like that. So the drafting of those clauses becomes very, very important, and it is important that you look out for such clauses. But you must inevitably stand up for your rights as players, because a sportsman's shelf life is limited, as opposed to a lawyer who can practice up to 90. A sportsman will only have about 15 years at the peak of their powers, or 10.
Actually, 10 years peak, yeah.
So you must, as much as possible, extract all the maximum value that you can from your career. As you see, these guys, many of them are retired, but they're still feeding off 20 years ago, etc., and guys spend a lot of money. So image rights becomes a very, very important aspect. Now, importantly, from this dispute, bringing the game into disrepute, they call them disrepute clauses.
Yes.
Of course, you may find, because of maybe poor contracting or poor drafting of contracts, perhaps some contracts may not have it, but it has become commonplace. It's become commonplace in many sports contracts to have something like that. So please be mindful of what
of the disrepute
clauses, and be mindful of that, because inevitably, in this day and age, they're going to extend it to your social media.
Which disrepute scenarios would arise in the Ugandan context? Maybe you would say racism, drug abuse, match fixing, like the basketballer. Yes. What? Crimes in the penal code, sexual offences, something like that.
Exactly. So inevitably,
yes.
Yeah, and of course,
domestic violence as well. Yeah.
But now domestic violence becomes a bit of a trick, because again, are you going into a person's personal life?
Yeah, but if that violence is wrongly attributed to the game, if I'm a captain and I beat my girlfriend, or I physical assault. Yes.
Player who's not significant.
Yes.
Second division.
No. Regardless, domestic violence is domestic violence. Yeah. So any instance where my home affairs end up bringing the rugby game into being brought into the fray.
What have you been seen with a hot belly somewhere in a married man?
Oh, now that one may be personal. That may not necessarily be. That may not be bringing the game into disrepute. Yes.
So inevitably, disrepute clauses, pay attention to them.
Unless you're Tiger Woods. Unless you're Tiger Woods, endorsements are being lost, and then
commonplace, and they're going to appear in sports contracts. Like I told you, some of these guys just copy and paste from wherever, and you'll find a clause like that. So pay attention to that as a sportsman, and handle your social media better. You should know that now you're not a normal Ivan Ojakol who can post whatever he wants on his social media. You should know how to handle it. But I think also there must be room for a way of you circumventing it, say through disclaimers or something like that.
Yeah.
So things like that. So of course there are other boilerplate clauses, of course, that provide for duration of a contract, etc. But importantly for sportsmen now comes in a clause or a provision on injury.
Injury, yes.
Injury. What does the clause say? Does the clause say that when you're injured, you continue earning money, or you not earn money?
That's important, yeah.
Because it's important for you to negotiate that and ensure that you continue earning money, or at least find a way of having some bit of course now it takes into the other discussion on medical welfare and what have you.
Yeah.
Medical insurance. Yeah? So, of course, again, I am very careful when I'm discussing these things, because I know we're in Uganda.
Yes.
Some of those things may not.
Yeah, many players once they get injured, some players obviously, when they get injured, may have provision from the club to support them, but there are few contracts you can look at and you can clearly see that they will mention that if the injury goes beyond the 5th month, you may either be on half pay, or you may not get any pay at all after 8 months, or something like that. So there may be a period of time within which no one can anticipate injuries, but you, as a player, you have to be mindful that if I get injured, what are my rights in terms of remuneration or medical support,
properly,
particularly in respect to that.
That becomes very, very important because rugby is a bit physical, and inevitably there will be a number of injuries. And many players have had stories of being abandoned by clubs, so that for me becomes very, very important. Yeah, so the number of them, of course, I mentioned duration, I mentioned the dispute resolution clause, know where to go when you have a dispute.
The escalation, yes.
Exactly. Actually, court has been dubbed as one of the greatest examples of bringing the sport into disrepute.
Yes.
Because originally sports was seen as autonomous and running its own parallel legal system away from. Yeah, but over time, the courts are now looking into sports matters and saying, you know what, especially where governments are funding sports and saying, no, but we can come and look into your affairs. But though the principle has been that, first exhaust the
internal remedies. Yes.
Then perhaps if you're not happy, then you go to court. Yeah, but inevitably, it will be quickly, you may rush to court yet you have a certain mechanism in place. Though, unfortunately, in our part of the world, many times those mechanisms will be on paper, but there'll actually be no proper.
No, but if you sign a contract, you are obliged to adhere to that.
No, but if there's none, and I have experience from some disputes.
Yeah, if there's none, then you go to court.
Yeah, because I think the principle, they call them ouster clauses, clauses that oust the jurisdiction of the High Court.
Yes.
Is that it must be properly clear. It must be a proper, clearly laid out mechanism. Oh, it's not there, even if it's on paper. You can always go to court and tell them, but I tried exploring this, I wrote to them, no one replied. I'm therefore here. So, this becomes very
so now, to cheat the exam, when it comes to matters where you need to escalate as a player, would you recommend players to file the letter or the communication as required under their contract or as per the laws, and then if that comes up and nothing has been done, then you can utilize other means?
Yes. Inevitably, you have to demonstrate to court that I've tried to, as much as possible, exhaust all internal remedies. And also the principles of judicial review from your normal legal knowledge. Judicial review says that you must explore all the available mechanisms of resolving a dispute before you go to court. So, for formality's sake, if you know that there's nothing there, but just try to file. So when the judge asks you, like, I tried, I explored them, I invoked the arbitration clause, no one called me for arbitration. I tried talking to these people, no one. Therefore, that's why I'm here. There must be a remedy for me.
Yeah.
The law cannot just be there and they cannot get a remedy. Yeah, so for me, that is very, very important for people to pay attention to and to know how to. It doesn't matter whether you're biased and you know that the guys who are there, no one's going to give you justice. You just go there for the sake of it, and you just prepare your case as you get it ready to go to the High Court so that you can get proper justice. Yeah. So for now, Edwin, I think it was
me personally, I think maybe also, I think one of the key things for rugby also is about, I think, not working hours per se, but times when required is something very, very important. Yeah. I think at times some clubs may use the loophole of reporting time to kind of strike the way, because you see when clubs at times, due to different interests that they are trying to push, may be forced to discipline some players on particular issues. So I would also think aspect of time reporting for training, reporting for game time is something very, very clear. At times, many players are either students or have jobs that can creep into rugby time, and that could be used against you as a rugby player. So, as however much you're trying to chase your hustle or your calling elsewhere, you must be mindful of any provisions of time in your agreement, because that can come to bite you.
This is what I also think.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether a club, if a club is properly committed, if they're paying 100K per month, that is a job.
That's a job.
Properly not a job.
Exactly.
So it's like you doing 3 jobs at the same time. You have to make sure that
the hours don't overlap.
So inevitably, you have to find a way of abiding by that contract. And complying. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble.
Exactly.
It's only where you're just doing club doesn't pay you, doing things for fun. Maybe there you can get away with it. But where there are proper stipulations and you decided you can as well become a fan if you wanted. Or if there's little money, you could as well have retired a long time ago, but you've decided to play rugby, and there's a payment coming through, and it comes through regularly, and you know guys proper comply with their side of the bargain, then please try and comply. Inevitably, in case you run afoul of that contract, they'll come after you. Yeah.
Okay. Now, parting shots. Personally, when it comes to disrepute in the sports, I think it's also very unique for me because also me, not a particular area of interest, but at least I've taken a lot of time off from the busy schedule to at least try to understand from a sports law perspective what it means to bring a particular sport of rugby, for example, into disrepute. Now, majorly, maybe just word of advice to those, maybe whether fans can be also held accountable for bringing the game into disrepute is something maybe within the confines of the game, but we can discuss that even on a Twitter space or something along those lines. But me, majorly, is that as players, the union has a right to discipline you. Because it's a sporting discipline. The understanding is that discipline is at the forefront of all this. So you'll be asked to account for your behavior as and when it is deemed to be in violation. I think now as players is that the role or the obligation starts with you to be able to put yourself in a position where you don't violate these particular player codes. Put yourselves in a position where you do not, because you see, it's very, very, it's common. You could be hard done by a bad decision on the field, and you go on social media and Twitter and they'll say, referee Edwin is a cheat, or is a thug. How can you not call this? And in doing so, you're kind of imputing that a referee is biased or something, and in doing so, you are saying that the refereeing society is biased, and you're bringing the game of rugby into disrepute because you're saying this particular club will never win when those referees are in charge. So as players also, you need to be mindful of particular comments. Now, how you try to circumvent that with a disclaimer, obviously, that may not necessarily work for you, but it puts the players also to live up to a standard of discipline. Notwithstanding, I think the union is not an entity that will only sanction for the sake unless there is reason to do so. So as players, I think players need to do their best to put themselves in a position and manage their affairs that they don't float these rules.
Okay.
So, Ivan, last shot on disrepute and contracting, and then we can wrap this up.
I think, and again, back to the aspect of leadership, I think some of these things, I think sometimes we perhaps overestimate some of these people because you think they're educated, you think a player is because an engineer or whatever, he knows the rules. It's possible the guy has even never read those rules.
Never read the rules, yes.
Rugby, he goes to play every weekend. What if the union went out of its way to ensure that sort of an orientation?
Yes.
Pre-season.
Pre-season.
Kind of orientation. I don't know, whatever they call them, seminars, whatever, to educate the players on these are the rules. But also, you know what education also does? Education also allows opinion and stakeholder engagement in some of these things. If a player thinks that is an overly vague rule, then they'll have opinions. They'll submit their opinions, and perhaps the union, in good faith, should be able to take them into account and find a way of either amending the rules or properly clarifying, or things like those. So it is something that I think the union should invest in getting experts, etc., to explain some of these things to some of these players. Because see, you don't want to, because now, in as much as some people have never heard of that term, bringing the sport into the industry, like what is this? Then the term has been around. Many of the sports law principles were the original conceptions of them were in good faith.
Yes.
Most of the time they've been abused because many times unequal bargaining power between the sports governing body and the players, etc., and also for selfish reasons by many sports administrators. But for me, I think things like those will go a long way in ensuring that there's some level of being on the same page or semblance of
a mutual understanding.
Because it is now as if there's a certain level of high-handedness. High-handedness as if there's some dictator up there and just telling you must do this, you must do. So for me, that humility in leadership and many times coming down to the level of a sportsman and ensuring that, you know what, these are the rules. This is what you must follow. This is what the law says. If you breach this rule, we're going to punish you like this, like this, like this. Because that, from that interaction, trust me, there will be no one will have excuses of we didn't know about this. We think this is overly vague. We think you're over applying yourself here, etc. So, well, the argument would be that ignorance of the law is no defense, but you'd be amazed by how many people have never looked at some of these documents. And many of them have come to our light only recently because of this Magomu incident. So, for me, that becomes very, very important. But also importantly, as a sports governing body, as a sports regulator, there must be a way of whipping into a straight line or into proper, what's the word, whipping these clubs. Because many times you blame the union,
yes,
yet many of the problems start from the club.
From the club, yes.
Has the club properly contracted a player? What does the club have in place as far as player welfare is concerned? Because there's a bit of a problem in Uganda because it seems the union seems to play both as a regulator
and welfare provider, even welfare provider,
and a commercial player in the market.
Yes.
So because of that, there's some things that may be a bit of a problem because, for example, clubs may say that we don't even have individual sponsors.
Yes.
Things like those, you get it?
Yeah.
So the union, again, it comes out to a broader governance question, but also whipping into a straight line some of these clubs and ensuring that, hey, but do you have contracts for all your players?
Yeah.
What do you have in place?
Yes.
Of course, the argument would be that we don't have money or whatever. But
yes.
That again comes down to how the union will handle that in terms of the trickle down
yes.
of money to the clubs and eventually to the player. So there's a wider governance issue that for me needs to be resolved as far as the running of sport and rugby in Uganda is concerned. And I think, again, it unfortunately goes back to the leadership question. Yes, the leaders have done well. We can't say they've been pathetic or they've been incompetent throughout their whole tenure. There are so many positives. But I believe many a time you want to compare yourself to the best or to the best people out there in the world. And I think that is a standard that they should be aiming at. Yeah, so, but first things first. Please contract players. The most basic of basics, contract players. By contracting players, it ensures that even these arguments of bringing the sport into disrepute, you don't find people
being shocked
or even
they are aware that what they did was wrong.
Or even calling out the union on Twitter. I believe, and I'm sure many people are hearing about this stuff for the very first time. Yet I remember it even first came out, I think when
Rujumba,
but also
Chambo
when Chambo went to court.
Yes.
I think there was a letter from the union saying that you're bringing the sport into disrepute by going to court. Remember Chambo went to court, yes.
Yes, Chambo went to court, yes.
Yeah. That would have been a very good decision, by the way, but for some reason...
No, it has been overtaken by events. There's nothing you can do now.
I don't
it's more of like being withdrawn. It's being withdrawn and
there's really going to be a
resolved it, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, I think for me, there's a broader governance question. And that needs to be resolved in order for our sports, and not only in rugby, but generally, to move forward. Yes, and the right people in leadership, we need more selflessness, and then I believe eventually our sportsmen will be happy, and us, who they bring glory to, who they make happy every weekend, we'll also enjoy ourselves and we'll get distractions away from the problems of work and family and girlfriends and
thank you very much, Cats Podcast, on that particular matter. What does it mean to bring a sport into disrepute, and also touching a little bit on player welfare. This is part 2 of the uncovering of the facts series, where we would very much dedicate time to resolving the issues surrounding the disciplinary proceedings involving Ivan Magomu, but also the broader picture of welfare of players, as well as addressing the plight and concerns following the decision coming from the Uganda Rugby Union. And wishing you all the best, and keep it Fat Cats as we bring more discussions, hopefully to have representative from the union and maybe particular players to address what they need to be done in respect to welfare. Thank you.